Hi there. These are my two Brazilian rainbow boas, Epicrates, cenchria. This one here, this is Link. He's called Link because his pattern kind of links together. And this is Minnie. She's covered in hidden Mickeys. It works for me. I have been wanting to talk to you about these incredible snakes since the beginning of this channel. But the reality is, I couldn't find a healthy adult to show to you. But thanks to our incredible friend Richard Bilbo, who you might recognize from our video about eastern indigo snakes and our video about emerald tree boas, these beautiful Brazilian rainbow boas are mine. And one of my first observations when I got these incredible snakes was how strong they are. They are unbelievably powerful for their size. In fact, the only snakes I'd ever held that were as powerful for their size as these were anacondas. In our video on green anacondas, I kept talking about how much anacondas remind me of giant rainbow boas. Well, it goes both ways. In fact, I soon realized that I was talking about an extremely powerful South American boa that has a ring-like pattern and spends a lot of time in damp places. And it doesn't matter if I'm talking about rainbow boas or anacondas. That description still fits. And so I thought, they must be closely related. But how close are they? It took me a while to find a good phylogeny that included multiple anacondas from the genus Eunectes and multiple rainbow boas from the genus Epicrates. Finally, I found a paper published in PLOS One in 2016 by Figueroa and others titled A Species-Level Phylogeny of Extant Snakes with Description of a New Colubrid Subfamily. This phylogeny included 3 anaconda species and 4 rainbow boas, including Epicrates cenchria. Not only are the rainbow boas related to the anacondas, but some anaconda species are more closely related to rainbow boas than they are to the other anacondas. Thus, to have a proper clade that includes all of the anacondas, you must include all of the rainbow boas. The rainbow boas are all more closely related to one another than they are to the anacondas. So rainbow boas are a thing, just like crocodiles are a thing and snakes are a thing, or like birds are a thing. But in the same way that any clade that includes both snakes and crocodiles must also include the birds, there is no clade that includes all of the anacondas without including the rainbow boas. Rainbow boas are tiny anacondas. And logistically speaking, they're probably the best pet anacondas. But they aren't notoriously easy to keep. Is that reputation warranted? Are Brazilian rainbow boas a good pet snake? And are they the best pet snake for you? To figure this out, we're going to have to score the Brazilian rainbow boa based on our 5 categories, which are handleability, care, hardiness, availability, and upfront costs. When it comes to handleability, we give the Brazilian rainbow boa a score of 4 out of 5. This is frankly a fantastic snake to handle. They're plenty big enough that they aren't easily lost or injured during handling. They're also good at hanging on, so they're unlikely to be dropped. And they tend to move in a slow and deliberate manner, which makes handling easy. Though they are plenty big enough to make handling safe and enjoyable, they're still small enough that they can easily be handled by most adults and even children. And generally speaking, they pose no real threat to their handler. Just don't let them wrap completely around your neck, especially if you're alone. They have a slow metabolism, even for a snake, which means that they don't poop very often. And that's good news. Their legs are too small to do you any damage. And they can't voluntarily drop their tails. Hooray! As adults, they don't tend to be bitey. But I am always a bit more careful with boas. As babies, they do tend to be a bit bitey. When you're a noodle with a head, the world is a scary place. And when you're a baby noodle with a head, it's an extremely scary place. However, they tend to grow out of that within a year or so. The other issue is simply that for their size, they are extremely strong. They can easily get you into, like handcuffs. And their bite, while rare and not likely to do any permanent damage, will be a decent little tooth punch, and if they hold on and coil, it will probably be an experience. However, if this does happen, just be thankful you picked the mini anaconda. When it comes to care, we give the Brazilian rainbow boa a score of 3 out of 5. Surprisingly, it isn't rocket surgery. These guys are somewhat notoriously difficult to keep alive, but the recipe is not complicated. It is just important and a bit different from that of most other snakes. If you want to kill a Brazilian rainbow boa, just keep them hot and don't give them access to water or humidity. That'll do it! Overheating and dehydration are the primary killers of these snakes. If you keep them at the same temperatures as your ball pythons or common boas, they will die fairly quickly. The same is true if you let their water bowl become dry. This shouldn't happen very quickly, as humidity in the enclosure should also be high, but if you aren't diligent about water, they will die. So when it comes to care, they should be kept at considerably cooler temperatures than most tropical snakes and keep the water bowl full. If you can do that, this snake should be fairly easy to keep. I would recommend a PVC enclosure that favors floor space but also gives them room to climb. With humidity being so high, wood just isn't a good option. And glass, especially with a screen lid, is a recipe for disaster. Inside the enclosure, I like a substrate like cypress mulch or cocoa husk that can hold a lot of moisture without molding. I should add that there are many people that are very successful keeping Brazilian rainbow boas on paper, even here in the desert of Utah. The key seems to be an excessively large water bowl that will increase the humidity and will provide them with a source of water that is difficult to overturn and will take a long time to dry out. Mine spend a considerable amount of time in the water as well, so make sure that it is large enough for the snake to submerge itself completely in the bowl. I still prefer a substrate that holds moisture, but remember, the water bowl is key. They do seem to produce a urate that hardens into almost a cement on the bottom of the bowl, so expect to really dig in and scrub that thing whenever they use the bathroom in their bowl. The good news is that they won't do this very often because they shouldn't be fed all that often. These snakes, unsurprisingly, eat like boas, and they also have a slow metabolism like boas, so keep their meals smaller and only every couple of weeks or so for adults. Warm and cool side hides and climbing branches are a great addition to the enclosure. A humid hide would be a good idea, especially if you're using paper as your substrate. For feeders, a diversity of appropriately sized rodents and rabbits and birds like chickens and quail make a good diet. Just don't overfeed them. Again, they eat like boas. I'd like to take just a moment to talk about our rad fans and stinkin' rad fans at Patreon. We are so thankful to you guys. And one of the things you might have noticed, I'm geeking out a little bit about these snakes and some of the rad science related to these snakes, and I do that on a regular basis. And sometimes it doesn't all make it into our video. But the good news is one of the ways that we try to pay back our rad fans and stinking rad fans at Patreon is by compiling an entire extra video every week called Patreon Extras. And so if you think you might be interested in some of the awesome stuff we talk about there, please consider checking out our Patreon. When it comes to hardiness, we give the Brazilian rainbow boa a score of 3 out of 5. This is a higher score than I would have expected to give. They really aren't that hard to keep alive if you provide the right temperatures, water, and humidity. You will want to get things set up before your snake arrives and make sure that you have all of these things right. That said, if you do, your snake should do great. Just don't mess up. These aren't like most other tropical snakes, so don't keep them like other tropical snakes. Babies are a bit more fragile, but this is the case for almost everything alive. I think the main reason that babies have a reputation for being super fragile is because if you're going to overheat or dehydrate your snake, you're probably going to do it in the first few months that you have it. If it survives long enough to become an adult, you probably knew not to overheat it or let it dehydrate and die. Also be aware of the signs of respiratory infection and know a good vet if those symptoms ever arise. When it comes to availability, we give the Brazilian rainbow boa a score of 4 out of 5. If you want a Brazilian rainbow boa, you can have one to your door by tomorrow. They will be in pet stores occasionally. Most expos will have a few. And online, you can get one whenever you want. When it comes to upfront costs, we give the Brazilian rainbow boa a score of 3 out of 5. These are not inexpensive snakes, but they're also not insanely expensive. You can easily find one for under $300. Now that is a lot to spend if you intend to overheat it or let it die of dehydration, but not that much for a really cool snake that is this beautiful. I mean, have you seen the iridescence on these snakes? They're gorgeous. Try to find a ball python that looks this pretty and see how much it's going for. The enclosure doesn't need to be massive, but PVC is a good idea. We recently received an enclosure from ToadRanchReptiles.com, and their enclosures would be awesome. Thus, the enclosure will not be cheap, but again, not insane. Substrate like cypress mulch, eco earth, and ReptiChip will not break the bank. Do not skimp on the water bowl. Get a big heavy one in which they can soak and that they cannot flip. Some hides, climbing branches that won't mold like spider wood, heat mat or tape, and a thermostat. Again, this stuff isn't going to break the bank, but you might want to check your balance before you buy it all. It's not cheap, but it's not crazy either. And that is why overall we give the Brazilian rainbow boa a score of 3.4 out of 5. I wouldn't call the Brazilian rainbow boa a beginner snake, as little mistakes can be catastrophic. But if you get the temperature and hydration right, they shouldn't be the nightmare that some people think. These are a snake for people that are diligent. But this is a dang reasonable anaconda, and one of the most beautiful snakes in the hobby. If what you want is a super strong orange iridescent mini anaconda with temperature and water requirements like a frog, then the Brazilian rainbow boa might be the perfect pet anaconda for you. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon. Where's your head? There it is. Okay. Handcuffs. They're so great. You guys, you're so cute. Mine spend a considerable amount of time in the water as well, so make sure that it is large enough for the... Mine spend a considerable...